This second panel, as I promised you earlier, is all about solutions. Specifically, we have a proposal in front of us devised by the Gang of Eight, and we're going to look at that hopefully through a critical eye, pro and con. So to my, let me introduce my panelists, starting with Sarah to my right. Sarah Hughes currently serves as Deputy Chief of Staff for Senator Michael Bennet. We here in Colorado are very fortunate that of the Gang of Eight, we have one of our very own in that group. Michael Bennet is. And we're going to have Sarah explain to us this. We've been referring to this, this act. I actually have the formal name of it here. It is the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act. It is 844 pages long. Sarah, did you bring a copy for our reference?
I spared everyone.
Okay. All right. But she has it memorized. Next in line is Nan Stockholm Walden. Again, you have all the bios in front of you, so I'm not just going to reread those. But you know, those of us here in the Roaring Fork Valley are very familiar with the impact of immigration issues when it comes to hospitality, restaurants, domestic workers. It's very important, though, that we hear from someone who is out there planting our food, raising our food, harvesting our food. And Nan, that is your role today, although I know you have several other areas of expertise. Nan's company employs 250 people, and it owns the world's largest irrigated pecan orchards. I was just asking Nan if she considers herself a rancher or a farmer, and the answer was both. Warren Klug, can't thank you enough for having this dream and making it a reality today.
Thank you.
Yep. Some say, and I won't disagree, that this is actually sort of a dress rehearsal for similar forums around the state of Colorado. Let us recognize that this first one happened here in Aspen, thanks to you. And now, when Warren puts together a blue ribbon panel, he doesn't mess around. Final introduction is our Colorado Attorney General. This is John Suthers. Thank you. He's been our Attorney General since 2005. In 2010, he was reelected by the largest margin of any statewide race that year. And I think that says a lot. Prior to being our Attorney General, John was appointed by President George W. Bush to be the United States Attorney for the District of Colorado. And prior to that, John served as Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Corrections for several years. Let's get started. And I'm going to start, Sarah, with you. Just because we really want to examine this proposal that is in the news hourly. First of all, this Gang of Eight. How did we end up with entrusting this huge job to 8 senators?
I think, is this working? Can you all hear me? Several of the senators had been working together on this issue for many, many, many years, actually, prior to this latest effort. The senators, there's 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. The Democrats were Schumer, Durbin, Menendez, and Bennet. And the Republicans were John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Rubio, and Flake. Many of you probably know that McCain and Flake are both from the state of Arizona, and so obviously they have a very invested interest on border security and other integration issues for their own state. Michael was specifically, I think, asked to participate in this based on his leadership with many of you in this room on the Colorado Compact. And I think that allowed him as a junior member of the Senate to be seen as a real advocate and kind of someone who's able to bring broad consensus to the table and provide solution-oriented measures. So that's a little bit about the group.
I'm going to ask you what may be the hardest question of the day. Give us an executive summary of the act.
So first I'll open with Ali started saying no one has to be an expert on the bill today. So those of you who are attorneys in the room and who know many, many details about immigration law, we'll take your questions offline because you probably know more about the topic than I do. But to go over the broad strokes of the bill very quickly so people have a sense of what's in it and what's not. I want to start with the broad goals and focus. 1, to strengthen our economy and our families, to better protect our borders, and to provide a tough but fair path to citizenship for those here without legal status. Just for some background on the bill and the way it's been perceived since it's been introduced in the Senate, it has received broad bipartisan support. It's received the support of editorial boards from the the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal. In Colorado, it's received the support of the Colorado Springs Gazette, the Durango Herald, the Denver Post, and many others. It has the broad support of the United States Chamber of Commerce, but as well with major labor organizations. It's the first time we've had a bill on immigration that has the support of both growers and producers and the farm workers. And I open with that to remind everyone that it was a negotiated bipartisan bill, which means we would argue that it thread the needle very appropriately to find real solutions to real problems, many of which you've just heard. So just very quickly on the background or content of the bill. The first title is in fact border security. Obviously with Senators McCain and Flake at the table, it was incredibly important to have a strong border security title to this bill. Many times when we speak, the first question we get asked, and many of you probably feel the same way, is tell me how we're not going to end up in this same place 10 years from now. Assure me we're not going to end up here with another 20 million or 15 million or 10 million undocumented workers. So this bill accomplishes that through several measures. One, by strengthening the border and maintaining some of the great work that this current administration has done over the last 4 years. Two, it implements an E-Verify system, employment verification system, which I know we've talked about a little today, and we can get more into that. The theory behind that is if we create an employment verification system and require all employers to use it, we won't have the same magnet drawing undocumented workers into our country. And so if everyone's using it and abiding by it, we won't have that, we won't face those same, the help wanted sign Ali talked about earlier. By making that Verify system a biometric system that will help reduce identity theft and inappropriate documentation, that too will deter this influx of undocumented workdocuments. Next, as Ali mentioned, we really need to have a strengthened legal immigration system that eliminates the backlog that we currently have and makes it much more efficient and effective for our families and workers. And then finally, a work visa system that allows us to stay competitive in this environment. So those are the very, very broad strokes. I'll walk through a few more highlights if that makes sense. Is that, or do you want me to stop there?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So on the border security title, the entire bill is focused around making sure that the border is secure up to a 90% efficacy rate, and that really only focuses on 3 areas of the border currently that are operating under a 90% efficacy rate. The Secretary of Homeland Security will have to put together a border security plan and a fencing plan, and there will be billions of dollars appropriated to implement that plan. That has to happen before any of the undocumented workers can adjust to what is now being called Registered Provisional Immigrant, RPI status. That's the 11 million people here undocumented. So I want to say that again. Before anyone can move from out of the shadows, the Secretary has to have a clear plan of action to strengthen our border. There are also several triggers that have to happen and be in place before anyone can adjust from RPI status, which will be a process of 10 years, and we'll get into that later. Before they can adjust to legal permanent resident, several triggers have to be made in order to secure our border. So first of all, that plan I mentioned has to be operational, has to be functioning and funded and functioning. Next, the E-Verify system has to be in place. Next, as we talked about, one of the earlier panelists talked about having a better understanding of both who's entering and exiting our country. I believe Ali mentioned earlier, many people come into this country under a legal work visa, but they stay here and overstay their visa because we currently have no mechanism to determine who's leaving our country. And so that system now has to be in place. Finally, that's entry-exit system has to have biographical data and biometrical data. So that's the border trigger measures. Many of you have heard that citizenship is, this path to citizenship is contingent on achieving these border measures. And that's important to make sure that we don't end up in the same place 10 years from now. Like any good plan, it's helpful to have a check-in point halfway through the process to catch your breath and say, is this working, is it not? So 5 years into the process, they will look at data. And if any of those 3 regions that are along the border that don't have 90% or above efficacy on their implementation, if any of those 3 sections in any of those first 5 years don't meet that threshold, we're going to take a step back, and a commission a bipartisan commission will be created to re-examine what else we need to do as a country to maintain those borders. So that's one of the other major triggers. There'll be some heightened oversight for DHS to make sure that our detention centers are working appropriately and that we have the right use of force policies and other mechanisms along the border. Very quickly on the second title, which is legalization. This is the process by which the 11 million undocumented, I oftentimes say inappropriately documented, because I so am aware of employers in the room who are doing their own due diligence to make sure that they're following the law. However, they operate in a world where we do have a broad use of inappropriate documentation. So very quickly, for those 11 million people, they can enter RPI status if they were in the country before December 31st, 2011. They have to be in good standing, meaning no criminal record, violent criminal record. They have to pay fines and penalties. That penalty over the course of 10 years on RPI status will amount to $2,000. That's a penalty that they tried to find that sweet spot of making it a real substantial penalty that will that people have to work towards to pay. However, at the same time, for many of you employers in the room, you're well aware that you want and need your employees to quickly get to RPI status. So in order to do that, they only have to pay $500 initially to apply, but by the end of that 10-year period, they have to pay the full $2,000. And again, that's important to balance the need to pay a penalty with the need to make sure that we're bringing that workforce who is currently unauthorized into unauthorized status. They'll be on that RPI status for 10 years. Midway through at year 6, they have to renew that. And at that point, they have to prove and demonstrate that they continue to have no criminal background, that they actually have been working or going to school in the country. They have to pay another part of their penalty. And then they will have that renewal process. At year 10, they can apply to final adjustment to legal permanent residence. And at that point, they'll have to again demonstrate that they have been working or going to school. They will have to demonstrate that they've been paying and filing their taxes during that RPI status. They will have to demonstrate that they have learned English. So some people, I know it's a controversial word, and I'll use it because I feel like so often it's just easier to throw the elephant in the room. Many people who are opposed to amnesty feel strongly about that and are not open to any bill that includes amnesty. Many would argue that this bill is not amnesty. It's a rigorous and earned path and tough path to citizenship. And those are the 2 broad strokes, and I'll stop there for now, and we can address the rest in questions. But that gives you a strong sense of how the legal path, legalization path works, and the border security piece.
Can you see why Michael Bennet values Sarah's work so well? That was an excellent summary. One of the outcomes we're hoping for today is that more people in this room are in touch with our representatives in Congress. What's the best way to contact Michael? And what's the worst way?
We have staff located around the state. Many of you know who they are. You can also access our office through our website, www.bennet. Oh my gosh.
Google it.
Anyway, it's the official website, Senator Bennet. But we have offices around the state, and you can write our office or email or call. We've been holding discussions like this around the state, and we'll continue to do so. And any of you who would like to host something like this in for your own business or organizations, we're happy to have someone provided to you.
And I want to use that as my segue that our representative in the House, Scott Tipton, has a representative here today. His name is Ian Lyle. He's standing up and waving at you, and he's available after this meeting to carry messages directly to Congressman Tipton. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, Sarah, thank you very much. Absolutely, Congressman Tipton is very interested in this issue and is following it closely. Similar to what Sarah said, if you have thoughts on this, I'll be around for a few minutes afterwards to take those comments, and then you can also always access us on our website. You can Google Tipton or just go to tipton.house.gov, and you can contact us through that. Thank you.
Well done, even without a microphone. Nan, I promised the audience earlier that you would tell us what this new legislation looks like from your point of view in the agricultural industry.
Well, first I want to just acknowledge my husband sitting in the back there, Dick Walden, whose father founded this farm and agricultural operation. This is our 63rd year of harvest, I believe. We run a pecan farm and processing plant where the nuts are cracked. It's the largest integrated operation of its kind in the world. We export all over the United States and also into Europe and to China, so we are doing our little part for the global economy and export balance of trade. This bill is sorely needed because I want to say that as a company and a family that is trying to do the right thing and follow the law, the system is so badly broken and it's causing so much human suffering that the status quo is just unacceptable. I also want to state that we have 260 permanent workers, all of whom have had health benefits, rich health benefits, since the 1950s. We were one of the earliest agricultural operations in our state to do that voluntarily. And we have many second and third generation who are citizens and whose kids are doing just what Dr. Mark Dahm described. They're going to school, to trade school, to law school, to fashion institutes, and they're becoming productive, wonderful citizens in our country. We also were one of the first employers to voluntarily use E-Verify in our state. And we did this to try the system. We had some trepidations about it. I will say that for us, it has worked well. Yes, once in a while the names are kicked back and they have to be redone because, as you know, particularly in the Mexican tradition, there are a lot of surnames that are used. So sometimes we get a false reading, but in general it has worked well. And we, as conscientious employers, do not want unscrupulous employers to be able to hire people underground, pay them cash, abuse them, have no accountability. We want them to compete on an even playing field with us, which is why it's so important for us to have federal legislation. I might add we operate a warehouse in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and another farm in Albany, Georgia. So for us, having federal comprehensive policies is very important. And so we would applaud the group of 8, their bipartisan leadership, in getting this bill together. It's a very important task. You know, I can say personally, my grandparents on my father's side both came over from Scandinavia. My dad was raised on a farm and is an American success story. Never was able to complete college, but all 4 of myself and my siblings were able to because of his hard work and my mother's hard work. But when my grandparents came over, it didn't take 10 or 20 years to be legal. They didn't have to hide in the shadows. They could go to work and try and fail and do what so many of our ancestors did. And unless we happen to be Native American, we all came from somewhere else a couple generations ago. That's been our great strength. So, and I can also say that we live within 30 miles of the border. Our personal ranch is very close to the Mexico border, and we have had drug smuggling activity, we've had break-ins, we've had fights among drug smugglers, and so we are living at ground zero in many ways for border security, and we welcome a good border security program and a rational border security program, but I can tell you a little bit more if I have the opportunity about some of our negative experiences with both the employer sanctions law and SB 1070, harassment of our workforce who is legal. This is very concerning to us as Americans. So I'll stop there with those preliminary remarks.
Great, and I hope we will come back to that. One thing we must do today, though, is not allow this to turn into a pep rally, because I think so many of our panelists are here because they're involved and they understand. But Nan, let me ask you, the act is far from perfect. there are 300 different groups have seen it fit to add amendments. Is there anything about the bill that you think is imperfect at this point that you'd like to see changed?
I think it's such a good start, and I think it's very important for us to remember that perfection is the enemy of the good. If we let this bill be nitpicked and divided up and chopped and sliced and diced, we're never going to get anything done. And we have a good opportunity here. So I would urge us all to move ahead with the basic tenets, which I think are fair and just, and fair to labor here, by the way, and fair to Americans who followed the system. And we have employees that have been waiting for years. And we have employees, for example, that we had to let go because they filled out the wrong paperwork, paid a lot of money to an advisor who unfortunately didn't file the right paperwork. And so after waiting for 9 or 10 years, they are told they have to go to the end of the line again. So there are a lot of people that tried to do the right thing, and through no fault of their own, because we really haven't enforced the laws in a uniform way since '86, are caught in this mumbo-jumbo. And we see that every day, where a spouse is legal, the other spouse is not. The kids are legal, the parents are not. A grandfather or grandmother or auntie or uncle are living at home. And when the Employer Sanctions Bill in SB 1070 was passed in our state of Arizona, we had kids afraid to go to public school because they were afraid the police would follow them home and find out that there was a member of the household that was not legal. And that's just wrong. There's got to be a better way.
Warren, I'm going to ask you to bring this back local again, because of course all politics are local. But I'm going to throw you a curveball you weren't expecting.
I can hardly wait.
An audience member asked the question earlier, come on now, can't we really fill these engineering jobs with our own workers? I'm going to ask you that same question. Come on now, can't we really fill the jobs now being filled in Roaring Fork Valley with our existing citizens?
I have to think that businesses throughout the valley would say, we're ready to do that in a second. We would certainly like to make sure that our employees are legal, and if there's anybody who's included in that, what is it now, 7.5% unemployment number, and they come to us and they're the kind of people that can do the work we need to get done, we absolutely would like to see that happen. The fact of the matter is that in the industry I'm a part of, the hospitality industry, and there are others, we have hard work to do. In my operation, we have a housekeeping department, and the work is hard. And there are other industries too. Who's working in kitchens throughout the community? That's hard work. What about healthcare and food processing as well as the folks who grow the food? These are hard jobs that, frankly, do not attract as many legal Caucasians as we would like to think, or other races, people who want to work hard. We don't have the applicants. If we did, those folks would be working for us. And that may be politically difficult to say, but the fact is we have hard work that needs to be done, and we have to hire the people who are willing to do that. Now, obviously, as an employer, we're trying to follow the law. We do that with I-9 forms and all the regulations. But you have to look at the fact of who is applying for those jobs and willing to do them. And we want to make sure that our employees are legal, and that others who are outside of the system have a way to get authorized status.
Okay. And I have to say it once, General Suthers.
Thank you.
I asked him, shall I use the formal address? And he said no. Please call me John. You have several unique points of view on this one, one of which is your role as not the Colorado Attorney General, but the U.S. Attorney General, if I'm using that phrase correctly.
United States Attorney. I would have liked to have been the U.S. Attorney General, but I was the United States Attorney.
That's coming up. So what does it look like from your point of view? What complications did you endure in law enforcement?
Folks, I want to emphasize in this Bible, badges, and business triumvirate, I'm the badges, okay? I've been a prosecutor much of my legal career. I was a district attorney in Colorado Springs. I was the United States Attorney here in Colorado before I became the Attorney General. I also ran the Colorado Department of Corrections. So I have a different perspective, but interestingly enough, come to the same conclusion. I'm dealing, my office is indicting drug cartels, We are dealing with very, very violent Mexican gang members in the United States. I can tell you that the taxpayers of Colorado are probably spending in the area of $100 million a year to incarcerate Mexican nationals in the state prison system and in county jails. And the federal government is, I think, now paying us about 2.5% of that a year. They're supposed to be reimbursing us for that cost, and they've paid less and less every year, so only a fraction of that. With all that knowledge, I have come to the conclusion that law enforcement would be greatly aided by comprehensive immigration reform. And let me just start out. This first hit me like a ton of bricks when I was the United States Attorney. On the federal level, virtually the only criminal enforcement that takes place in immigration, as a practical matter, the only enforcement that can, given the numbers, is something called aggravated reentries. These are people who have come into the country illegally, have committed relatively serious crimes, either been placed on probation or incarcerated, and either upon being put on probation or after their incarceration have been deported. And they have then come back into the United States. And the mere fact of coming back into the United States is a fairly serious crime with a minimum 5-year sentence, called aggravated reentries. When I was the U.S. Attorney, we would prosecute maybe 450 to 500 aggravated reentry cases a year. And unfortunately, it would always be upon them committing another crime that we would determine who they were, and they were in fact an aggravated reentry. And so I spent a lot of time, including on the West Slope, talking to law enforcement, trying to get a picture of this, and that's where I first got my glimpse of how broken the system was. Now, this was pre-recession, and I don't know what the numbers are now, but it was a notion that about 200 to 225,000 people were coming in to the United States unauthorized to do seasonal work. We talked about resort, ski, but a large part agricultural work on the West Slope. There were, if anybody wanted to do it legally, there were so few permits or whatever available, it was virtually impossible. And particularly in the agriculture area and in the resort area, there was not the workforce that could otherwise be hired. So the economics were driving this thing. These folks were coming into the country, giving false Social Security numbers. And Al had also already referred to the total, complete dysfunction of the Social Security Administration. So, you know, it's not like the guy with the real Social Security number is ever told that somebody's fraudulently using the Social Security number. So they were committing ID theft. And what was very apparent to me is that 90% or more of the people coming into the country were working hard, sending the money back to Mexico, and at the end of the work season, returning to Mexico. But it was virtually impossible for us to weed out this, 5 to 10% who were doing bad things while they were here. We wouldn't, because a lot of the folks were in the shadows, things weren't being reported, we typically would not find out who these aggravated reentries were until they committed another crime. And as I've analyzed this over the last several years, let me just talk about some other issues that come out. Reporting of crimes. This population of undocumented folks has serious disincentives to report crime. And they are disproportionately victimized, oftentimes by others, unauthorized folks. Let me give you an example, and this would be something that would be well known to the immigration attorneys in the room. My office has, I think, had 3 or 4 indictments in the last 3 years of people that were making an incredible amount of money, posing as people that could help unauthorized or undocumented folks with their immigration problems. It was nothing more than grabbing a couple $100 from them and never doing another thing. I mean, it was a total, complete scam. Do you think they report that? No. We'd find out about it usually from legitimate immigration authorities that would be dealing with someone and report this activity to us. Worker abuse. One of the incredible realizations that I've come to over the last several years that frankly, despite my law enforcement career, I didn't realize the nature and extent of was this human trafficking problem. And folks, we have a human trafficking problem in Colorado. Both labor exploitation and, sadly enough, sexual exploitation. We've had 2 very large statewide indictments in the last couple of years, and the girls that we're talking about are 12, 13, 14, 15. And this underground world we're talking about in the shadows greatly facilitates that. We've got people in the country illegally that are, in many cases, marketing these young girls. But we've also got, as I say, of course, labor exploitation. So what's the bottom line? From a law enforcement perspective, we need to know who's coming into the country, and we understand that these businesses have legitimate economic needs that are not being met. Let's give them the ability to take in the number of people they need to work, but let's identify who's coming into the country, make sure they're not, the folks coming to work are not the guys that we're trying to prevent from coming into the country. Let's make sure that they leave when they're supposed to leave. So we've got to have a robust worker visa, worker permit system that identifies entry and exit. And that screens to make sure that these criminals aren't among them. In terms of this path to citizenship, the most refreshing thing to me is this diligent, and we now have the information basis to do this diligent effort to weed out the criminals. Because there's a lot of folks in this country that are in fact engaging in serious criminal conduct that we need to identify and get out of the country. I can't emphasize how every single one of the parts of the aspects of this has to be pursued vigorously. For example, border security. We're in the middle of a case right now that will come to fruition not too long from now, where people who are either citizens or are legally in the United States are, because there's so much money in it, actually being sent down to the border, crossing the border, getting a drug, and I'll leave out the details because this indictment hasn't come down yet. It's really unbelievable how it's happening. And these people with legal status in the United States are trafficking it back into the United States. And folks, this is not marijuana to compete with all the homegrown stuff. This is pretty serious stuff. We got to have decent border security to be able to pick up that sort of thing that's going on. So all aspects of this have to be upgraded tremendously. I've become absolutely convinced over the last several years that comprehensive immigration reform will seriously aid the law enforcement task as opposed to undermine it.
Let's fantasize for a moment that Congress as a whole passes this. Is there still a role left for the states, and if so, what is that?
It's kind of an interesting debate. I happen to be a guy, as you know, I took on the federal government because I think that the Affordable Health Care Act, basing it on the Commerce Clause, was unconstitutional. And by the way, the Supreme Court agreed with us. They said The Commerce Clause did not allow you to mandate Americans purchasing a particular product or service. So I'm really into the enumerated powers in the Constitution. But guess what? A lot of my fellow conservatives don't like to acknowledge that one of the enumerated powers that was specifically given to Congress is immigration and naturalization. So it is first and foremost a federal power, and it has to be. But as Mark Shurtleff said, the problem is the federal government's dropped the ball. And that's why so many states and so many frustrated citizens have pushed for state involvement. If we get comprehensive immigration reform, I think there'll be less demand, for the state to do something. But let me tell you, there were some folks that were, complaining about E-Verify, things like that. For a robust worker system to work, we're going to have serious sanction for the employers that aren't engaging in it. And whether that has some state law involvement in it or strictly federal laws or something like that, I don't know. But my guess is there'll still be some state issues, but I do think the vast majority of state concern about this issue has been because the federal government has done such a poor job of dealing with the realities of it.
Go ahead, Warren.
If I could follow up really quickly, there are three things that the state has done over the past months. One is undocumented people are allowed to get a driver's license. Controversial issue, but on the other hand, as we heard earlier, it's an insurance and safety issue, identification issue. I think most people, and clearly the legislature, felt that it was the right thing to do. Secondly, we have just seen in the past weeks passage of a bill that's a major change in college tuition, and that is undocumented students who have been here in high school and there are other conditions, but they now can pay in-state tuition instead of out-of-state tuition. And then the third issue the state has addressed is what's the responsibility of our local police officers to pursue immigration questions, and the legislature backed off from that and said, look, we want the police to do police work and not be immigration agents. And so that gives our police and safety officers the right to do the job they should be doing and not additional. So there are things like that are state issues, and I'm sure there are others, but overall, clearly it is a federal issue, and we need to look to the federal government to make it right.
I want to make sure that I would take issue with you on the last point to some extent. I still believe that local law enforcement will be the primary vehicle by which the criminal element, the aggravated reentries, are brought to our attention. And it bothers me. There was one community in Colorado that directed law enforcement that they, this is before this first batch of state laws, should not even report people with criminal records. They did a thing and they come up with a criminal record. You got to deal with that.
Sure.
You got to deal with that because they're really going to be the people on the ground that are going to run. There's only so many immigration officers.
This has been so much information. I'm going to return to you, Nan, because numbers are powerful, but in my opinion, stories are even more powerful. So to keep us motivated after this session ends, can you share with us some of the things that keep you motivated about this?
Well, I just see, as all the presenters have added parts to this complex puzzle today, that the future of our great country, some of the most wonderful innovation has come from people who are immigrants, who are willing to risk their lives to come to this country for better opportunities for their children and their grandchildren. And we need to foster that. We also need to weed out, just as the Attorney General was saying, those who mean harm to our country. And believe me, we are at ground zero, and these people are vicious. They'll kill their own grandmothers to advance their own interests. And we've through not addressing this issue, leaving the status quo, we've enabled coyotes and people like that to do even more harm. Kidnappings, kidnappings of business people. My husband Dick, who's a pilot, we buy pecans from Mexico, which helps them and helps us to process in our plant. He can't go down there anymore. It's just too dangerous. And so we have to remember, Mexico is one of our greatest trading partners, and to see them be able to build up their own economy is good for us, it's good for our security. We totally agree that the sovereign border, which I think John mentioned again, it has got to be controlled. We have to know who's coming in and out. As one of the Border Patrol agents said to me, and they have the combinations to our gates, we have cattle and livestock, we cooperate with them, we appreciate what they do. He said, Nan, right now I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. I don't know if I'm chasing Jose who wants to come and pick lettuce or Jose who is smuggling drugs. And if you could make my haystack smaller, then I could do my job better. And that's what we want. We want to know who are the good people that want to come here and work like our ancestors did, and who are the ones that we need to incarcerate, protect our citizens from. I also want to say some concerns about civil liberties. We have, for example, our plant manager. She is third or fourth generation American. She has a degree in biochemistry. The agriculture and food processing is very high tech today. Don't talk to me about unskilled labor. It is high tech. And she has an MBA from the University of Arizona. She drives a late model SUV with 2 little car seats in the back for her baby girls. Okay, so she's been stopped by law enforcement. Officer, what have I done wrong? This is going from her home to our plant. Well, you fit the profile. Now, our governor, Janet Brewer, will tell you, we don't profile in Arizona. Well, he says to her, you fit the profile. And officer, what is that? You're driving a late model SUV and you're driving the speed limit. Okay, now on that criteria, any of us could be picked up. And, is that the America we want? Now, as a lawyer, I believe in civil liberties. I absolutely believe in the Bill of Rights. But I have come a long way. And I think an identifiable ID card with a biogenetic marker, certainly appropriate, whatever, tamper-proof. Because let me tell you something else. As an employer that has pored over the personnel files and tried to weed out those that are undocumented or incorrectly documented, it is tough. They go to good counterfeiters. We always followed the law from day one, all the federal forms that were acceptable to hire our workers. We now do, by the way, also a drug test before they could even be considered for employment, and we think if more employers did that, that would go a long way to curing the demand for drugs. If you couldn't get a job, if you were high or drunk, you shouldn't work in this country. And you sure shouldn't be operating dangerous machinery, like our pruner or other trucks or tractors that can kill other people. So I am optimistic that common sense will prevail, but we have to avoid the people that want to divide us, that are fear-mongers, that are frankly racist, that are hate-mongers in this country. We have to work together. And by the way, I work with several of the unions in Arizona. We are a right-to-work state, but the SEIU and others have endorsed this program, and the farm workers, I think you mentioned, Sarah, because I think when we protect labor and bring them out of the shadows, it's good for all labor, whether unionized or not.
Okay, we're going to go very shortly here to questions from the floor. If my mic assistants could take that as their cue. What I'm going to do now is just go right back down the line, starting with you, Sarah. I know what it's like to sit on a panel like this, and you're thinking, I wish I'd covered something. This is your chance, and ideally, whatever it is you take to say briefly will serve as a question trigger as well. What should these great folks who've taken a morning out of their lives to learn about this, what questions should they be asking?
I'm going to take advantage of the first question you asked me. The first question, you framed it really quickly. I think as I listened to the questions this morning, and some really passionate, heated questions and concerns, I would remind everyone that this is a bipartisan bill, and almost everything discussed here today, and infinitely more detailed topics, have been negotiated in a bipartisan way. And so you're not going to love everything, but on the unemployment issue, there's a cap for construction and trade workers at 15,000 workers for construction trades, because they recognize in those fields it's harder to, there's greater unemployment with them among Americans. On ag workers, where we're not able to attract the workers, the cap's much higher. They really have negotiated all the nuance and detail in a truly bipartisan manner. So whatever specific issue you have, You can go hunt and pick through the bill. You can look at different information online and get your specific answer. We're happy to answer it at our office. But keep in mind, you're going to like a lot of it. You're going to squawk and grumble, and it's going to hurt your stomach in other parts. But I will tell you, the part that hurts or you don't think is brilliant was negotiated in a bipartisan way and is infinitely, infinitely better for our economy, our communities, our law enforcement, our businesses, and the people in this country. And so look and continue to look at the big picture, ask your specific questions, challenge the bill, but know that the status quo is a hodgepodge of broken, outdated measures that have huge unintended consequences, and in some cases, intended consequences that are fundamentally damaging our economy and allowing us not to compete in a 21st century economy. Is that okay?
You address both.
Well, Sarah, that's beautifully said, and I just want to underscore that. And I also want to say for all of us, it's really important to speak up, whether you have small businesses or large businesses, whether you're teachers in law enforcement, through your churches, your rotaries, et cetera, your clubs. It's really important to get this issue out there and to support the leaders who are brave enough, the public officials that are willing, like Senators Bennet and Udall and the Attorney General, to take on these difficult issues. It's so easy to cop out and join the chorus of naysayers. It's more important to lead. It's more important to find a solution. When you're in business, you don't have the luxury of imagining the world as you would like it to be. You have to deal with your competitors and the environment and all the things that Mother Nature that change every day. And you have to work as a team. And it really distresses Dick and I to see that some people seem to be caring more about getting reelected than leading and doing the right thing. And so back up those people that are taking that step and standing up there. And nothing's more important than hearing from your constituents, from your district or from your state. That's what really motivates politicians to take action. So let's back them up.
Good enough. By the way, I've never had a chance to meet a pecan wrangler before, so I think
There are a lot of bad nut jokes in our family.
I'll bet. Okay, we'll leave that alone. Well, I would like to talk about two issues that are side by side. One is the E-Verify issue, and the other issue is how does this nation address the 11, 12 million undocumented people who are here now? They are here now, and a major portion of them, 70% maybe it's more, are employed. And they're working for people, they're working for businesses that need them. That's why they're working there. And they're not all going to go away. They're not going to disappear. It's absolutely wrong to suggest that there would be some gigantic deportation program so all 11 million people will leave. And in fact, if they did, there are many, many businesses like the hospitality industry, agriculture, food processing, healthcare, others, that would absolutely be paralyzed and out of business. So how do we make this work? E-Verify will help us do two things. Number one, once it comes into full effect, I think it starts 3 years down the road according to the bill that's been proposed. 2 years, okay? Well, once it's really fully in effect, what that will do is, on the one hand, provide a great disincentive for people to come across the border illegally because they won't get jobs. That help wanted sign at the border will be gone because if you're not legal and you're not documented, you can't work. That's what the E-Verify system will do for this nation and for employers. As an employer, it gives us something to lean on and say, this is making sure that we're doing it right, and that's a good thing. But if E-Verify comes into effect before we address these 11, 12 million people, many of whom are working but undocumented, then it's going to paralyze employers and people nationwide. And it will, in my mind, I've called that kind of a ticking time bomb, because all of a sudden, these millions of people who are working will no longer be able to get to a new job or apply for a new job. They will be left out of the system. Not a good thing when, in fact, we need those people to do the work that they're doing. That's why they're employed right now. So in my mind, the issue has to be, let's figure out a way to provide legal status, legal work status for the however many millions of people there are. That is number one. And then number two, we can look at E-Verify to make sure that things do not get worse, that we do not find ourselves in this boat 15 years down the road and say, gee, what do we do with these 10 million people? There won't be 10 million undocumented people because they won't be able to work. I think that's really important to support our employers as well as we're supporting the folks who are working. And this, to me, is very much a business issue. As an employer, I need the people I need. And we're trying very hard to make sure we're hiring only folks who are documented. But let's face it, if there are 10 million undocumented workers in this nation, they're working somewhere. And you have to believe that they're working in Colorado.
As the law enforcement guy, I will end with a law enforcement caveat. We as Americans have to look ourselves in the mirror and understand that so much of the border problem, the drug cartel part of it, is not simply solved by immigration reform. There's only one thing that solves it, and that is Americans getting a hold of their voracious appetite to get high on a whole variety of drugs. As long as we produce the demand, there will be someone to meet it. So don't think that immigration reform alone is going to solve that problem. Only we can solve that problem.
Thank you. And questions from the floor, please. This gentleman right here.
What benefits will I receive with an RPI status, basically a citizen, but not permanently, or things like that?
First of all, remind us what RPI stands for.
So RPI status is the new status for those 11 million people who are currently in the country and were here prior to December 31st, 2011. It's an applied for status, so they'd have to go through that rigorous application process I already described. First and foremost, I'm going to describe it more broadly and what it means to you. I want to broaden it out a little bit. What it means to our economies, and where Warren left off, is that immediately those people who qualify, so they're not criminals, they pass a background check, they've gone through the application process, they pay a penalty, they've paid their taxes, they're able to work. That's a huge, significant issue. For many people in the country under that who are here undocumented, it also, for the first time, allows people to enter and leave the country for temporary reasons. So many people have been in this country and who have not been able to return home for any number of reasons, and this would also allow them the ability to travel in and out of the country. That status would last 10 years. And then ultimately you'd be able to move to legal permanent resident, again, if you met all the rigorous criteria and paid penalties and learned English and had been going to school and paying your taxes. And then at that point, people can choose to become a citizen or choose not to. And that's they're empowered to. But from an employer standpoint, and as Warren was saying, by making that 11 million people, taking them out of the shadows for crime prevention reasons and for employment reasons, is hugely significant to our communities and our economy.
Does that answer your question? And for more information?
And I didn't answer your healthcare question. I apologize. Healthcare is not there. Anyone here under RPI status does not qualify for any means-tested benefit of the federal government. So unfortunately, in your case and other people's cases, they would not be able to, the Obamacare would not apply to them. However, if they work for an employer who provides health care, the employer can provide that. But they just don't qualify for the means-tested federal programs.
All right, next question. Right there in front of you, LJ, please. Your name?
I'm LJ. I'm still LJ. I'm a friend of Steve's for 40 years. I have a question. At what point do you delineate the free market system as opposed to market manipulation by the government for hiring employees? And I'll be specific. The young lady has a pecan farm, has documented it's hard to find employees back to before Cesar Chavez, as opposed to my friend Warren, who has a hotel here in town, and a recent study, economic sustainability study by the Chamber, states that the local wages are kept, artificially low, or they haven't kept up with the CPI. When do you put this market manipulation by the government as opposed to the free market system that says maybe you should raise your wages. I know there's a system.
Who wants to
Start with
start?
that? I'll take a start on it. First of all, as I said, you know, in our system, and maybe partly because this is a family-owned company, and my husband started out and our kids doing every job on the farm. Okay, and that's how I was raised, not on a farm, but in a small dry cleaning business as well. So we start with that assumption, and with our permanent employees, because we want a static workforce. In other words, we want to invest in training these people and that they stay, because these are very high-skilled jobs in certain ways. And so we invest in our employees with good health care and so on, helping to have them stay. Now, we pay way above the minimum wage, which I'm sure in Arizona is much lower than here. I think it's around $7.80. So even in our seasonal workers, we're much higher than that. And we also provide housing, and we provided a program where people could build on our land and own their home. We gave them the land free, and then there was a HUD program where they could actually have their own homes. So for the first time, many of them were homeowners. So I think, you know, good employers need to invest in their workforce. And I am a little bit worried about the bill, because I don't like Washington saying how many ag workers we need or how many high-skilled, you know, tech workers we need. I believe in capitalism and the market. But there has to be a floor, because you do have unscrupulous employers, and unfortunately it will take advantage. So I understand the theory behind the minimum wage, but we have to compete in a very tough marketplace, and Americans like their food safe and cheap. And you know what we have to do with hygiene and to protect the food supply and track it and recall it within several hours, if God forbid there's a recall on any of our products that are sent out all over the country and all over the world. It's a big challenge, and it's expensive. So, but I share concerns about the government over-manipulating the statistics of what should be hired and at what wage.
Thank you for raising that question. Go ahead.
Some people would argue that the best thing we can do is to actually take this undocumented class and give them legal work authorization status, because that will do the most to actually level the playing field. So we're not, by having such a large undocumented population, it depresses current wages. Also, in some of the work visa mechanisms that were created under the bill, it actually grants portability now for workers who are here on a visa. That alone is meant to create more market-driven dynamics, meaning their visa is no longer attached to one employer, which allows, oftentimes in the past, there are bad actors, it's not all employers, but then their visa's basically married to that employer, and if the employer doesn't provide all the kinds of benefits and investments that you're talking about, they can be exploited. And by granting portability, it creates much more market-driven dynamics into the work visa program, which we've never had before.
Fast comment too, if I could. I think that our wages and benefits and so forth are already market-driven. Nobody in this room pays minimum wage, you can be sure of that. And the fact is that if there are undocumented employees in the community, they're already here. And by making them legal, or rather giving them the right status, documentation, that is not going to lower wages at all. As a matter of fact, I think as Sarah points out, it goes the other way, because the bad actors or employers taking advantage of folks have to do it right. So I think we're already in a market-driven situation, and I think it's even better once we get everybody into legal work status.
All right. We actually have several high school students in the room, and I'm going to threaten you that we're not going to close without hearing a question from one of you. You are 20, right? So you don't qualify. College, okay. I'd love to hear a question of any flavor from a high school student, so be forewarned. We're waiting for that. In the meantime, who else? Yes, sir. Your name, please.
MZVZ. No, I won't need the mic.
No, please use the mic for the benefit of the camera as well.
Well, my voice. Anyway, MZVZ the third. Nice to meet you again, Attorney General. Okay. What I want you to comment on as an open question, and it's two things actually, but they're intertwined. One is, why are you encouraging and destroying our American honor system that we've had, that it burdens the American-born population here. All right, we've had an honor system that's being destroyed. The second component is this. Under Ronald Reagan, and I was against it, the amnesty program, the stuff that you're rapping here today, they were rapping in terms of Reagan's administration, and it hasn't worked, and they said it was 10 or 11 million. Now, why? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask you a clarifying question, though? What do you mean by the honor system?
You have to remember, when you went for a job, you didn't have to show ID, all right? You didn't have to go through all those changes. Remember, our tax system is also an honorary program. When you get to the fascist states in Europe and other places like Latin America, their tax system is not an honorary tax system. Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to respond to that?
Well, I'll start. The problem is the system, whatever you call it, honorary or whatever, is so badly broken that we are suffering very deleterious consequences as a result. Business is suffering from the system. Law enforcement is suffering from the current system. And while I share your concern about the fact that the last time we went through this notion, it didn't work. I do think we have learned from that experience, and I don't see an alternative. These 11 million people aren't going away. All the problems that I've described aren't going away unless we do something. The problems that the business community have described aren't going away unless we do something. So you kind of made it sound like everything's great, and why don't we just keep on going down the road? And I think the reality is that most conservatives don't think everything's great, and we've got to do something. And and I think, frankly, the timing is correct. You know, I'm a dedicated Republican, and my party just got their butts kicked. And I think that's part of why the timing's right, personally, because the party's in an introspective state about how do we deal with some of these issues and come out of them with solutions that don't permanently render us a minority party. So he seems to view the world as just being great as things are, and that's just not the situation we're in.
Point of view. Yeah.
I think one fast comment is that there were problems with what happened in 1986 under the Reagan administration, and those problems have been addressed by the leadership that's put this new program together. They're well aware that in '86 steps were taken to leave the door open to further problems, and I think it'd be proper to say the legislation is crafted so that door is not open anymore.
Is anyone going to ask the Heritage Foundation question? It was dismissed earlier, but it's in the news and it's not going to go away right away. Over the next 50 years, this, according to the Heritage Foundation, might cost us $6 trillion. $6 trillion we don't have. What do you say to this?
I'd say that the drafters of the bill, the 8 members, 4 Republican and 4 Democrat, have committed to making this deficit neutral. Based on their math, they believe they've accomplished that. They will wait. We're still waiting to get the CBO score, which, for any of you who know such things, the Congressional Budget Office scoring process is, God only knows what that's going to come back with. People can argue about the effectiveness of that. But they have intended to make it deficit neutral, and it is being paid for through the fines and fees and penalties that are established throughout the bill. And if it's not, the 8 of them are committed to addressing that.
I think Mark addressed part of that this morning, that you can't look at just the costs of legalization. You have to look at the benefits and the long-term benefits over generations of bringing more talent and ingenuity and a younger age demographic. You want to see what happens if you don't have any immigration? You look at Japan. They have an aging population, and they're totally stagnant in their economy, and it's because they have chosen to close their doors. So, you know, that having young people come into the system and work hard and advance through entry-level jobs and then work their way up, that is still possible, but not when we have 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. That's not a sustainable system.
Speaking of youth, am I going to get a high school question? Yes, ma'am. Your name? Wait for the mic, please.
My name is Jocelyn, and I go to Aspen High School. I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I just got my papers to be able to go to college, and I just want to say that I'm really thankful, and I'm about to go to college and graduate and be counted as an in-state student, and I'm just really happy and excited. So thanks to all of you guys.
Gosh, thank you, and good luck to you. Good luck to you. I'm going to call, due to popular demand, on Kathy Klug. Would you give us your name, please?
Hi, I'm Kathy Klug, and I'm the college counselor at Aspen High School. And Jocelyn and hundreds of kids like Jocelyn are hearing hope today. And kids, that's why I'm glad you're here. I want you to take the message of hope back to your fellow students and thank this community for delivering that message, because they're the young people we're talking about, entering our system with hope and education and ready to advance the workforce in the United States. So kids, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you heard these speakers today, because what they have to say is that we are a community of people trying to go forward. And I thank so much the entire panel, the employers, the government associated, Sarah, your office, and the senator for being here, because what happens when these young people don't hear a message of hope is what Nan described in Anne described in France. They aren't educated, they don't know the message of hope, and they are left to become, instead of residents of the dorm rooms, residents of our prisons. And so what I want to say is thank you for starting this here in Aspen, and thank you, kids, for coming and hearing this and continuing in that vein of hope. You have a bright future.
Thank you. And I know there are many more good questions. You know, one of our goals today was that you would leave with more questions than you came with. Did we achieve that? Yeah. Okay. We're also hoping that you leave with more educated questions than you came with. Once again, thank you to the panel. We're going to give Warren the final word, which is very appropriate here. We have cut into your time, though. Let me warn you.
I hear you. Okay. Well, it has been quite a morning. I just want to say a couple of things before we break up. I want to thank again our participants and the folks who have been here to speak, and of course everyone who's been here with us throughout the morning, and our sponsors, the Aspen Chamber, the Aspen Institute, and support from the Forum, or the National Immigration Forum. Thanks to everybody for making it happen, and also our friends here at the St. Regis who provided the space for us. We've had lots of information this morning, from a review of what our problems are and with the current immigration law, and the requirements and responsible solutions that have been offered up, and options that can work. These issues are important to the individuals who are caught up in our present system, but they're important to employers as well. And I truly say this is an employer issue for sure. We're talking about people who are involved in their neighborhoods and their communities, their schools, their churches and congregations, and they're important to their employers. We recognize that America has a tradition of treating people in a fair way and a proper way, and we think that's important as well. More than any time in recent years, as we have heard, now we have an opportunity to make some choices and to pursue meaningful immigration reform. As many of our elected leaders in Washington have said, now is the time. And I urge us all to get engaged in the issue, everybody here, and to stay engaged in the issue, to let our voices be heard in positive ways. And whatever your opinions are, and we've had different ones expressed today, get involved and let your voice be heard. What would be the impact, even this week, if everybody in this room would get online, write our elected leaders here in Colorado, and tell them how you feel about these issues? And what would happen, and what would be the impact if you did it again next week, and the week after, and the week after that? It's not right for us to go home and say, gee, that was interesting, and that's the end of it. We need to let our voices be heard. It's so important. We have a broken system, but there are good options and good answers out there, and we need to make sure that they are pursued. We owe it to the people around us and those in our communities, and we owe it to the businesses that make our economy strong to help make change real. America is a nation of people who care about other people. We're a values-based nation, and we want to do the right things for each other. And a system that supports the needs of business and industry. And that takes me back to the story I told this morning about Jose graduating from high school. He's a promising young man who just wants to go to college and has found the barriers to be too much. He's prepared to learn more and to be a contributing member of our national fabric. That's all he wants. I know him. He's a great kid, and he deserves our support so that somehow he can get beyond that big brick wall we talked about earlier that stopped him in his tracks. To paraphrase a famous American who said something like this years ago, to our elected leaders, tear down this wall. Thank you very much to all of you for being part of it.